If you spent any time in fandom spaces in the last few years, you've probably noticed that they're all dominated by culture war rhetoric. This goes for anime manga, video games, comic books, TTRPGs, and even some IP that are just in general associated with the wider nerd subculture, like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Things weren't always this way, of course. Nerd culture, which is probably a woefully inadequate term, but one I'll be using anyway, used to have very different cultural connotations. When I was a wee lass, my nerd hobbies were mostly about escapism and being cringe with my friends. Don't get me wrong, IRL, it's still very much that. I would love to share a picture of a bunch of us 30-somethings doing the Ginyu Force pose at a con last year, but I'll save you and me both the embarrassment. Anyway, what was once a niche but passionate network of subcultures comprising Klingon speakers and Naruto runners has become a toxic pit of gender identity debates and media literacy denial. In the waifu wars of the early aughts, choosing Asuka over Rei said nothing really about your political convictions. The same cannot be assumed today. And if you gleefully show me a meme featuring any K-On! Character in the year of our Lord 2023, I may very well guess that you have the 14 words tattooed somewhere on your body. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean to imply that nerd culture was apolitical prior to Gamergate or anything like that. I was, after all, a little black girl growing up in an era in which the only cultural referent for black nerddom at all was Steve Urkel. To many, I was an anomaly. And as such, I endured years of microaggressions, and I'm pretty sure I dished out a fair share of my own. But what interests me is how the weird shit my peers thought I was cringe for being into has somehow become one of the most enduring battlegrounds of the culture war. The other day, I was on Twitter. Mistake, don't ever go there, it's a cesspool. And I saw what I guess is best described as a nested thread. Following each one back all the way to the original source, you'll notice that they each have a picture of a happy family, accompanied by 3 simple words: right-wing propaganda. Not everyone in these screenshots would consider themselves right-wing necessarily. Much of it is tongue-in-cheek, implying that a happy, ethnically homogenous, and heterosexual family is anathema to the left and the media that the left creates and venerates. Therefore, when such a family appears in supposedly untainted media, such as those produced in the Far East, they should be wielded as a virtue signal to others who may agree. Now look, I have some bad news for these folks. White supremacy and heteronormativity are not exclusive to the right. Some of the people they would claim to hate the most actually agree with them in practice, and many so-called leftist spaces are whiter than a Jim Crow-era tennis club. Full disclosure, I consider myself deeply on the left, if it isn't already obvious. But like many others of my political persuasion, I don't recognize myself in the picture painted by throngs of angry culture warriors. I suspect that the open allegiance we see with the right wing among certain sectors of nerd fandom is due to a warped perception of what the left and its values are, as created by social media algorithms and journalistic outlets. They see the left as cry bullies who openly attack the foundations of what they love about their hobbies, and they feel gaslit when people tell them that it isn't happening. I did an entire video highlighting the disparity in coverage of sexual themes in Eastern developed games versus Western ones, and you should check it out. But the TLDR is that sexual depictions of female characters are increasingly seen as sexist by default, while the same isn't true for characters of other genders. Game developers, especially those in Japan, who create mildly erotic content, face increasing barriers to their artistic creativity. Though there is an argument to be made that the unrealistic bodies we see in male characters in fictional media are, at least in part, due to the patriarchy, I think there are plenty of examples of thirst trap depictions that are made neither for nor by cishet men that get a pass. Tabletop RPGs who have alignment systems and inherently evil races have, to be quite honest, always rubbed me the wrong way. It's one of the principal reasons that I've largely avoided D&D and have instead chosen other TTRPGs. Thankfully, I have plenty to choose from. However, there have been, and continue to be, plenty of attempts to eliminate any traces of this perceived racism from Dungeons and Dragons. But unlike a single racist caricature, or something else that's more isolatable, what's attempting to be removed is fairly fundamental to the gameplay itself. It's easy to see why an attack on the fundamentals of gameplay can feel personal to longtime fans of a series. And believe it or not, there are people who believe that The Last of Us and Sonic the Hedgehog are promoting inherently right-wing values through their gameplay, such as fear of impure infection or restoration of natural harmony. Let's leave aside for now how neither of these are exclusively, or even primarily, associated with right-wing politics. This idea that there is something fundamentally wrong with the medium itself and should be challenged or changed is real, and it has an audience, and to deny that doesn't really do us any favors. These are just a few examples that fans of nerd media harp on as being leftist attacks on the media they love. And it's further reinforced by the fact that on social media, the people that they run into who are most likely to hold these positions and discuss them passionately tend to be people of color or queer, groups that have been, in recent years, associated heavily with leftist politics. The most obvious place for this, of course, is Twitter, where algorithms that thrive on pitting populations against one another create echo chambers where extreme positions flourish, meanwhile rewarding people with engagement when they say edgy things to those who they consider their enemies. Which brings me to the elephant in the room. The actual, genuinely disgusting and bigoted behavior that plagues nerd fandoms. Decades of 4chan culture has made a very large section of them very comfortable with slurs and racial epithets. Black-pilled incels will say horrible things about and to women in the industry. While I do think some of these guys can be de-radicalized, I'm not particularly interested in that project myself. God bless anyone with the patience to do so. But to that population, all I can say is that you look like a bunch of toddlers throwing a temper tantrum when you don't get your way. If a few remakes of older IP with race and gender swapped characters is enough to send you on a bigoted tirade against innocent people you share a fandom with, then you're a child, and no grown-up is ever going to take you seriously. In fact, I posit that the reason we see some of the ridiculous shit I've already gone over is at least in part just to spite trolls and goblins like you. Being detestable isn't going to frighten people into agreeing with you, but it will inspire people in positions of power to do shit just to spite you. Know that when I'm talking about the general anti-woke crowd, I'm not really talking about fascist trolls. The vast majority aren't really like that, and they despise those people just as much as the rest of us do. The problem is that anyone who says they want conventionally attractive female characters with jiggle physics is grouped in with those guys. And as a reaction, they say, if the left calls me a fascist for playing D&D, then I'm against whatever it is that they are. I'm not saying this to victim blame. I just want to explain a phenomenon in hopes of potentially, eventually, eliminating it. Look, in reality, you'll find just as many lifelong gamers at DSA meetings as you will in anti-woke YouTube video comments. The people organizing Food Not Bombs almost certainly don't think Sonic the Hedgehog is making you a fascist. No one at the Marxist Reading Group has much of an opinion about which race you choose in your next D&D campaign. Hell, they may even want you to invite them along. The issue, as far as I can see it, is that there's a glut of properties, all created by corporations who are chasing a bottom line. They rehash old IP because of a perception of safety and investment. They spend huge sums on creation, production, and marketing, but give creators little time or freedom to create works that are actually good. Market research is aware of demographic changes in Gen Z, the target audience, who are more likely to be BIPOC or queer than previous generations. The human rights movements of the 2010s, such as Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and the push for trans rights, have greatly impacted national conversations, with arguably some minimal successes in social awareness. The bigger gambles that corporations are taking with their approach to creating content, along with shorter turnarounds on their production schedules, means that at least some of them want a shortcut to attracting audience attention. So in place of a lovingly crafted piece, they'll create soulless cash grabs with brown or queer painting on them in order to secure the support of underrepresented minorities. This creates a negative feedback loop in which some will point out that while the piece in question may be mediocre, at least there's a racial or sexual minority character that they can latch onto. They'll also point out, quite fairly, that if this piece were equally as mediocre but with an all cis-het white cast, it would not get nearly the amount of hate that it does. Not every property with racial and sexual minorities can be as high quality as Spider-Man or Nimona, nor should they really be expected to be. This in turn tends to drown out all criticism of the original piece, rejecting them as inherently racist, sexist, or queerphobic. It can be quite difficult to untangle legitimate criticisms from bigoted ones. Why are pieces with minority characters front and center subjected to such harsh criticism? Are minority characters not free to be mediocre as well? Is it bigoted to refuse to financially support media with characters that don't appeal to you? Is it racially exploitative to put a minority character in a mediocre piece in order to enliven it? There's an idea of a pendulum of public opinion that swings back and forth over time. While I'm skeptical of such a framing, I think it's something that a lot of people believe in. Here, take a look.
That's the biggest thing that I want moving forward is just, like, I want to make sure we keep the ground we've taken, like, because, we're going, like, knock on wood, we're all gonna be around this industry for a very long time, and the goal is in that during that time the culture is going to swing like a pendulum from like moments of like conservative moments and like very liberal moments, and we need, in the moments that the pendulum swings in a direction that is not in our favor, we need to make sure we hold on to the ground that that we've taken. We need to make sure that we continue to support each other and make sure that we keep each other in this industry. And it's all about community. And that's one of the things that, frankly, the other side understands.
See, I'm not really a fan of this us versus them logic when it comes to media creation, especially not in an era in which so much of it gets made. But also, both liberals and conservatives are to my right. So fuck a whole ass pendulum that does not even include me along the path that it swings. All y'all stories are support of global capital and the police state anyway, so like, it's neither here nor there in my humble opinion. But after a string of major financial losses across Hollywood studios and streaming services and AAA game studios, I feel like we're on the precipice of a pretty big change in global entertainment media production. Ultimately, corporations are unsure of which factors exactly have turned off audiences enough to impact their profits. The culture war is not yet legible to them in a way that they can reliably exploit the desires on both sides of the equation. Also, culture war slap fights shift quickly, far too quickly to fit neatly into a production schedule. So, dear Hollywood and AAA game producers, I have the answer to all of your woes. You listening? Okay, here it goes. Make less expensive shit. You don't need to spend $250 million on a movie written by an AI for the ideal average Gen Z consumer because that person doesn't exist. Look, instead, make a bunch of smaller budget things for a wide variety of consumers. Like a gay romance set in Victorian England, but with mechs. Oh, I got it. An ancient political drama, but with jiggle physics. How about a body horror musical starring Meryl Streep and Cardi B as a couple? Hell, go to AO3 right now and pick a highly beloved fanfic, adapt it completely faithfully, no alterations. Guaranteed to be a better return on your investment than whatever the fuck this is. Angry culture warriors are furiously typing away at perceived ideological enemies who are mostly just straw men of real political positions. Meanwhile, the real enemy, capitalism, is cynically just throwing fuel on the fire. Look, in short, you're not right-wing just for being into trad families. Sorry. And you're not left-wing just because you boycotted the Wizard game. We all want more diverse content made by competent, well-paid artists. For me, I hope that the future of entertainment media is an actually, truly, genuinely diverse one, with something for everyone, including the people I don't like. But who knows? Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'm making new videos on the regular. I really hope to see you guys back again on this channel. If you have anything that you want me to cover, any ideas about this topic that you think I didn't really cover adequately, drop them in the comment section, and I will talk to you guys next time.